It begins in silence, not the peaceful kind, the other kind, the silence that weighs on your chest, that curls around your bones, that doesn't just surround you, it becomes you. Grief. We all meet it eventually, through death of a parent, a friend, a child, through a miscarriage, through the loss of a relationship, a homeland, a version of ourselves we'll never be again. But when it comes, this uninvited visitor, what do we do with it? Where do we take it? Who teaches us how to hold sorrow? In the modern world, we have hospitals, coffins, crematoriums, a single day off work, a stiff handshake, a polite, "I'm so sorry for your loss," and then we're expected to move on, quietly, efficiently, as if grief is a mistake to be corrected, as if mourning is an inconvenience to be managed. But it wasn't like this. Once grief had a rhythm, it had rituals, it had a place in the village square, in the temple, in the body itself. You didn't mourn alone, you mourned together. In the ancient world, grief was not hidden behind closed doors. It was painted on face, screamed into the sky, carved into stones, woven into clothing, songs and stories. Because grief wasn't a weakness, it was a passage, a sacred crossing between the world of living and the unseen beyond. Today, we start a journey through that crossing. This is not a guide to healing, not a self-help checklist, but a remembering of how humans for thousands of years faced death with ritual, and in doing so, gave sorrow shape, gave it breath, gave it meaning. So tonight, as the world sleeps, we'll descend into the forgotten rituals of grief, from funeral fires in the jungles of India to monks' dances in West Africa, from Celtic caning songs to Victorian mourning gowns, from the ghost festivals of East Asia to the ancestor altars of Latin America. We'll ask, what happens when grief is no longer witnessed? What wisdom have we buried alongside our dead? And is it time to dig some of it back up? We'll ask, what happens when grief is no longer witnessed? What wisdom have we buried alongside our dead? And is it time to dig some of it back up? Because beneath the silence, something ancient stirs, a cry, older than language, a drumbeat still echoing in our bones. Let us begin. The disappearance of mourning. In 1969, psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross introduced the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. It gave people a language, a framework, but something strange happened. Grief became linear, predictable, private. We began to treat it like an illness, something to be treated, managed, timed, But if you have ever truly grieved, you know, grief is not tidy. It doesn't arrive in stages. It arrives in waves, tidal, erratic, crushing, then calm, then cruel again. And yet, the world expects you to behave, to be productive, to smile in meetings, to answer emails while your heart is breaking. We no longer wear black for months. We no longer tear our garments or smear ashes on our skin. We are discouraged from crying in public. Funerals are brief, wakes sterile. It's as if we are embarrassed by sorrow, as if we believe ignoring death will keep it from happening. But in trying to avoid grief, we've only made it more lonely. Imagine this. You've just lost someone you love. They were your anchor, your mirror, your heartbeat, gone. In many ancient societies, your mourning would begin immediately, not with isolation, but with action. The community would gather. You might be wrapped in ceremonial clothes. You might be carried to a sacred fire. Drums would sound. Songs would rise. You would not be alone. Grief was not something to hide. It was something to express. And there were specific ways to do that. Ways that were handed down over generations. You might wail. You might fast. You might shave your head. You might paint your face with charcoal. You might sit in silence for 7 days. These weren't random customs. They were technologies of the soul. Ways to move grief through the body. Ways to let it breathe, transform, and be seen. Now compare that to today. Your loved one dies. The hospital calls. There is paperwork, logistics, emails, insurance, a brief memorial, a few frozen casseroles from neighbors, and then back to work. No screaming, no keening, no tearing of clothes or long nights by candlelight. Just coping. Quietly, numbly. Modern society treats mourning as a personal problem. But grief is not a problem. Grief is a proof of love. Grief is an initiation. And initiations require witnesses. They require ritual. Without it, sorrow festers. It turns inward. It becomes anxiety, fatigue, illness. It hides in the body, waiting to be felt. Across nearby every ancient culture, grief rituals had something in common. They were physical, they were communal, they were spiritual. Because our ancestors understood, to process death is not just to understand it, it is to honor it. To allow soul of the dead to depart, and the soul of the living to remain whole. The body needed to do something. The voice needed to cry out. The heart needed company. And perhaps, most of all, the mourner needed to be seen, not pitied, but witnessed. You're not broken for feeling this much, the community would say. You're not wrong for crying. You're human. And this is the cost of love. Imagine white stone buildings, olive trees rustling in a dry wind, a city rising from dust and myth, Athens, It's 400 BCE. A young man lies dead, struck down by illness, his body washed by his mother, anointed with oil, wrapped in linen. Outside his home, the women begin to wail. This is not chaos. This is not hysteria. This is ritual. In ancient Greece, death was not a whisper behind closed doors. It was public. It was poetic. It was performance. The first stage was processions, the laying out of the body. Family members washed and prepared the corpse. Coins were placed over the eyes and in the mouth. Payment for Charan, the ferryman of the underworld. The body was displayed for mourning. This was no quiet viewing. Friends, neighbors, relatives all came to grieve, and the most vocal were the women. They beat their chests, tore at their hair, sang laments that blended memory with metaphor. To wail publicly was expected. To cry loudly was not weakness but reverence. Sorrow needed a stage. Before dawn, the next ritual began. The ikphora, a funeral procession. The body was lifted and carried through the streets, sometimes on a bier, pulled by a cart, sometimes on the shoulders of men. Musicians played mournful flutes, choruses chanted. Professional mourners joined in to amplify the grief. People followed behind in a solemn parade, their garments dark, their heads bowed. The dead were being returned to the earth, but not before being acknowledged, not before being honored. And everyone, young and old, was expected to participate, because grief in the ancient world was a civic duty. After the burial or cremation came the most revered of all, the epitaphios logos, the funeral speech. In times of war, it was a public address. A speaker would rise before the people and deliver an oration for the fallen. Not just personal loss, but communal grief, a moment of reflection and reinforcement of collective values. This was mourning as philosophy, mourning as nation building. The dead were remembered not just for who they were, but for what their deaths meant. But Greek grief didn't end at the graveside. It continued in the theater. Tragedy was born from mourning. In plays by Euripides, the most sacred and civic of spaces, the amphitheater became a vessel for collective sorrow. Grief walked the stage in flowing robes, mask in hand, eyes unblinking. The death of Agamemnon, the madness of Medea, the fall of Oedipus. These were not mere stories, they were rituals. The chorus wailed, the audience wept. Because theater was not entertainment, it was catharsis. Aristotle called it catharsis, the purging of pity and fear through art. To watch tragedy was to feel one's own grief, to let it rise and be released safely, communally. Grief was not a shame. It was a human inheritance, something to be faced together. In a world without therapists or grief counselors, theater was the medicine. It gave form to the formless. It transformed loss into meaning. Now let's move forward a few centuries to Rome. If Greece gave us tragedy, Rome gave us spectacle. The body was paraded through the city. Musicians played. Actors wore masks of the ancestors, images to honor lineage. And again, women sang the Nina, the mourning song. The more powerful the family, the more elaborate the ceremony. But even for the poor, there was dignity. Burial societies ensured that every citizen had a proper send-off, because to die unmarked was to be forgotten, and to be forgotten was the true death. Roman tombs lined the roads into the city, not hidden away in quiet corners, but displayed. Names carved into stone, faces painted onto walls, epitaphs that spoke directly to the passerby. Stranger, as you pass, remember me. The dead were not gone, they were present, watching, waiting, wanting to be remembered. Today, we lock cemeteries behind gates. We place the dead far from the living. But in Rome, the message was clear. Death is not the opposite of life. It is part of it. In both Greece and Rome, grief was not treated as a mental health crisis. It was a sacred task. The rituals weren't about getting over it. They were about carrying it well, with honor, with poetry. Grief was not cured. It was performed. And through the performance, through the procession, the oration, the theater, the soul of the mourner was reshaped. They were not told to be strong. They were given a role to play. And in playing that role, they could grieve deeply, without shame. Today, we hide our grief. We whisper it behind closed doors. We try to stay strong. We medicate, isolate, suppress. But in the ancient world, grief was a rite, a visual embodied experience, a passage worked with others. Not to escape pain, but to honor it. Not to forget the dead, but to keep them close. The role of professional mourners. She arrives before dawn, face veiled, voice ready. She does not know the deceased, but she knows grief. It lives on her throat. It trembles in her belly. She is a mourner, a professional, and her job is to cry for you. In the ancient world, the wail was a signal, a sonic bridge between worlds. The scream of mourning was not just emotional, it was ritual, an alarm to the spirits, a summons to the ancestors, a declaration to the village. A soul has departed. Witness this grief. But when the family could not cry loudly enough, or dared not to break down in public, they hired someone who could. The morologists of Greece, the dirge singers of India, the keeners of Ireland, the cry women of Africa. Different names, same task, to give voice to sorrow. This was not considered shameful. It was a respected craft. These women memorized the stories of the deceased. They composed personalized laments. They used metaphor, history, even humor. They tore their garments. They smeared ashes on their skin. They beat their breasts. They fell to the ground in weeping. Their grief was theater, but also medicine, because To hear your sorrow in another's voice is to know you are not alone. In the windswept hills of Ireland, a tradition persisted for centuries. The caning woman, she stood at the head of the corpse, chanting spontaneous laments in Gaelic, each one unique, each one a spell. The caning was wild, unstructured, raw. It blended sobbing with singing, and often rose to a frenzy. To outsiders, it looked like madness. To the Irish, it was catharsis. It was that without a proper caning, the dead could not rest, nor could the living. Across sub-Saharan Africa, professional mourners played another role. They were intermediaries between the physical and spiritual world. In Yoruba funerals, wailing women sang the deceased into the arms of the ancestors. In Ghana, dirge singers embodied the grief of the community. The songs were not just about death, they were about lineage, land, justice, continuity. The wail was history, the cry, a conversation with the past. These rituals were not quiet affairs. They were explosive. Audible grief was necessary because silence was seen as dangerous. If you did not cry, the soul might linger. In rural India, death brought women together for a night of song. Long improvised Varahe Geet, songs of separation, were sung in dialects passed down through generations. These were often sung in group circles, call and response, rhythmic, poetic, and mournful. The dead were addressed directly. The living mourned what was lost and what would never be. Women who specialized in this role were often widows or older members of the community. They were seen as spiritually seasoned. They knew how to guide others through the dark. Their role was not to cheer up the family, but to go deep into grief with them, to make the pain bearable through beauty. Why was it almost always women? Perhaps because women were seen as the keepers of the emotional world. Perhaps because patriarchal cultures could only tolerate deep feeling when outsourced to a female body. But perhaps it's something more ancient. In many indigenous traditions, women are the midwives of both birth and death. They help souls enter the world and they help them leave. Their bodies have known pain. Their voices know how to cry. And in those cries, they create space for others to feel. But with the rise of Christianity, colonialism, and modern rationalism, the wail became suspect. Professional mourning was seen as primitive, too emotional, too theatrical. Religious authorities banned caning in 18th century Ireland. Colonial powers in Africa and India forbade native death chants. Even in Greece, mourners were discouraged from public displays of sorrow. Grief became privatized, quieted, sanitized. But something was lost. Because the wail was not just noise, it was structure. It gave the mourning body a role to play, a way to expel the unspeakable. What do we do now, when the world expects us to grieve in silence? When no one cries with us? when we are told to move on, stay strong, keep busy. Perhaps we must become our own mourners. We must wail again, even if quietly, even if only in the mirror, even if only in our dreams, because grief left unheard turns inward, and the ancient world knew it must be sung, it must be shouted, it must be seen. Sitting with the departed, the body lies still, eyes closed, mouth slack, no longer breathing, but not yet gone. Candles flicker, the room is quiet except for whispers and weeping. This is not the end, this is the vigil. Before the funeral, before the burial, there is a sacred window of time between the final breath and the body's return to the earth. In many ancient cultures, this time was honored, guarded, watched. The dead were not rushed away. They were not sipped into bags. They were not vanished into hospital basements. They remained among the living for a little while longer, because death was not considered instant. It was a transition, and every transition deserves a witness. In Celtic tradition, when someone died, the body was washed and dressed, laid out in the home, surrounded by flowers, food, and sacred objects. And then the vigil began. Family and neighbors gathered. They brought drink, they brought stories, they brought their presents, and they stayed all night. Someone always stayed awake beside the body, to sing, to cry, to pray, to keep company with the soul as it found its way beyond. This was the origin of the wake, to wake with the dead, to stay awake so they would not be alone. Many ancient peoples believed the soul lingered for a time. It hovered near its body, watching, listening, deciding where to go. Some cultures said 3 days, others said 7. During that window, the veil between worlds was thin. The dead could speak, the living could hear. So people kept vigil not just out of respect, but to protect the soul, or perhaps to be protected by it. Candles were lit to guide the spirit. Mirrors were covered to prevent it from becoming trapped. Children were kept away. Doors were left slightly open, because death was not just an event, it was a mystery, and mysteries require stillness. In Jewish mourning customs, the vigil is known as Shemira. It means watching or guarding. From the moment of death until burial, the body is never left alone. A shaman, a guardian sits nearby, reading psalms, whispering prayers, maintaining silence and presence. The body is considered sacred, not a shell, not waste, but a vessel that held life. And life, even in its leaving, must be honored. The shaman does not distract. They do not scroll their phone. They simply sit. The stillness is a part of the grief. It allows it to rise gently, like steam from warm water, slow, invisible, profound. In Tibetan Buddhism, the time after death is delicate. The soul enters the bardo, the in-between state. For 49 days, prayers are said, rituals performed, mantras chanted. Monks gather to read from sacred texts, guiding the soul across realms. In some regions, the body is kept in the home for several days. Family members sleep beside it. Offerings are made. Incense burns continuously. This is not morbid. It is intimate. A farewell that unfolds slowly. Because in death, as in love, there is no need to rush. The vigil is more than custom. It is a threshold. It is a space where the mourners begin to accept, to see what has happened, to touch the body, to cry in its presence, to speak words they were too late to say. In the vigil, time stretches. There is no schedule, no productivity, only presence. And in that presence, grief begins to take shape. In the recent years, a movement has returned, the death doula or death midwife. These are people trained to assess the dying and their families, not to cure, but to companion, to help prepare the body, sit with the bereaved, create space for vigil. They offer something medicine often does not: humanity. A reminder that death is not a failure, it is a passage. And passages are best walked with company. When my grandmother died, we left the hospital in silence. Her body whisked away. No goodbye, no stillness, no vigil. We returned home to empty rooms, plastic flowers, a funeral brochure. And I remember thinking, is that it? But it wasn't, of course. My grief didn't end there. It only began, alone. How different might it have been if we'd keep watch, if we'd sat beside her just a little longer. The vigil is not about doing, it's about being. It gives the body time to catch up with the heart. It slows the moment down so the soul can register what has changed. We live in a culture obsessed with speed, but mourning cannot be hurried. The ancient world knew this. That's why they lingered, why they stayed, why they kept the lamps lit through the night. When someone dies, don't rush. Sit, breathe. Let the air fill with silence. Let the grief settle like dust. Let the presence remain just a little longer. Because what we don't feel now will wait for us later. In the next chapter, we'll leave the candlelight vigil and move into the public sphere. The grief was not hidden, but worn. Black veils, heavy fabrics, social codes that told the world I'm mourning. We walk now into the world of the mourning dress and the ways grief was made visible. The black veil, mourning dress, and social codes. She walks through the town square, a long black dress trailing behind her. A thick veil hides her face. She doesn't speak. She doesn't smile. She doesn't need to. Everyone who sees her knows she is in mourning. This was once the norm. Grief had a uniform, a shape, a color. It wasn't hidden. It was worn. For much of history, clothing spoke where the heart could not. From the grand courts of Europe to the villages of India, what you wore told the world what you had lost. There were rules, there were timelines, there was etiquette. Because grief was not considered a personal affair, it was social, visible, and deeply ritualized. Perhaps no culture codified grief like the Victorians. In 19th century England, especially after the death of Prince Albert in 1861, mourning became an art form. Queen Victoria wore black for 40 years, and so did much of the empire. Rules were elaborate. A widow wore full black for 1 year and 1 day, and then for another year she might wear half mourning, greys, or lavenders. Jewelry was limited, often made of jet, hair, or onyx. Social appearances were reduced. Laughter was frowned upon. Even stationery, household decorations, and calling cards were printed in black trim. This was not just fashion, it was ritual. The clothes announced to the world, "I am not the same. Treat me gently." Why these strict codes? Because mourning dress did what our words often can't. It gave grief a shape. It made the invisible visible. You didn't have to explain your sadness. Your clothing carried it for you. Strangers gave you space. Neighbors lowered their voices. The world slowed down just a little. And in that slowing, there was dignity. But mourning fashion wasn't just about outerwear. Victorians created keepsakes from the hair of the deceased. Lockets, rings, woven brooches. To modernize, this may seem eerie, but for them, it was comfort. A physical piece of the one who had passed, carried close to the heart, not buried, not erased, remembered. Some mourning rings were engraved with the name and date of death, a circle of gold to symbolize unbroken love. These items were not morbid, they were tender, proof that even in death the bond remained. The Victorians didn't invent mourning attire, they simply formalized it. Across the world, grief had a wardrobe. In parts of West Africa, mourners wear red and black, a signal of both pain and power. In many Asian cultures, white is the color of death, purity, and the soul's journey. In ancient Rome, mourners donned dark togas, toga pulla, to mark their sorrow. In Japan, funeral kimono are worn with precise color and fold direction, always left over right. In medieval Europe, nobles wore black hoods and cloaks, fabric dyed with rare expensive pigments to mark solemnity. In all these cultures, the principle was the same. The outer self should reflect the inner world. Grief was not invisible. It had color, it had texture, it had weight. Today, mourning clothes are rare. Most funerals are black for a day and then nothing. There's no sign you are grieving, no silent announcement. no visual language of sorrow. You return to your office, to your errands, to your bright colored clothes and neutral expressions. But inside, you're breaking. This absence creates confusion. Others don't know how to treat you, and you may feel pressure to pretend you're fine. Without the visible markers, grief becomes invisible. And invisible grief is often unmet. Mourning dress did more than inform others. It reminded you. Each time you rose in the morning and draped yourself in black, you remembered, I'm not who I was. I am in a sacred time. It gave you permission to move slowly, to withdraw, to cry. The clothing created a liminal space, a threshold between what was and what would be. It said, grieve. As long as you need, the world will know and understand. Perhaps we need a new kind of mourning dress, not just in fabric, but in presence. A way to show the world without words that we are carrying sorrow. A bracelet, a patch, a necklace, a color. A signal that says, please be gentle. I'm walking through shadow. And just as the living wore mourning dress, so too were the dead clothed with care. In many cultures, the body was washed, anointed, and dressed in garments reserved for the final journey. White robes in Islam, shrouds in Judaism, red silks in parts of China for the elderly, burial suits in Christianity. These garments were not chosen for style. These were chosen for meaning. And the act of dressing the dead, of buttoning the shirt, folding the sleeves, tying the sash, was itself a ritual of love. Grief is not invisible. It lives in the body. It craves expression. Clothing was once its language, a language we have forgotten, but perhaps could remember. From lamentation to silence, the erasure of grief in the West. Once we screamed into the sky. Once we tore our clothes and smeared our skin with ash. Once grief was a ritual, a procession, a lament, a sacred wound. Now we shake hands. We whisper, I'm sorry for your loss. We put on a suit and we carry on. The rituals faded. The wailing stopped. Grief became invisible. And in its place, a silence settled in. It began with the rise of the modern world. Factories, science, sanitation, speed. Death, once witnessed in homes, was now handled in hospitals. Bodies, once washed by kin, were now managed by professionals. Grieving, once public and extended, was now compressed. A funeral, a burial, a return to work. We became efficient, clean, orderly. But in this effort to make death manageable, we made grief unmentionable. By the 20th century, Western psychology began to treat grief as a problem to be solved, something to move through, a disorder if it lingered too long. a failure if it made you cry in public. We medicalized sorrow. We measured it in stages. We assigned it expiration dates. And if you were still in pain after 6 months, you were encouraged to seek treatment. Because in a world obsessed with happiness and productivity, grief is an inconvenience, not a passage, not a teacher, not sacred, just unfortunate. The communal aspects of mourning slowly disappeared. No more processions through the streets. No more black armbands or long veils. No more month-long laments or ritual fasts. Instead, grief became a private affair. A whispered phone call, a neatly printed obituary, a closed casket service in a sterile chapel. And when you leave that chapel, the world expects you to be done. But grief doesn't end there. It begins there. And now, you walk through it alone. Rituals do more than mark time. They hold you. They give your grief a structure, a rhythm, a container. When those rituals disappear, grief doesn't go away. It just loses its form. It becomes insomnia, fatigue, rage, numbness, anxiety, depression. The quiet feeling that nothing means anything anymore. When mourning is suppressed, it doesn't vanish. It mutates. And when a culture forgets how to mourn, it begins to rot from within. It wasn't always this way. We didn't always feel ashamed to cry. We didn't always apologize for missing the dead. We used to build monuments, tell stories, hold vigils. We used to sit together in the dark and light candles just to say they mattered, they were here, and I'm changed. When ritual disappears, we are left to invent our own. Some light a candle, some write letters they never send. Some wear their loved one's jewelry. Some speak to the stars. These are quiet acts, but they matter. They say, I still feel you. I still carry you. Because ritual is not always grand. Sometimes it's the smallest gesture that keeps us from falling apart. But things are beginning to shift. Death doulas, home funerals, public altars, online memorials, communal grief circles. People are waking up to something ancient, that we've lost our rituals and we want them back. We don't need to return to the past entirely, but we can remember what it knew. That mourning is not weakness. That grief is not a disease. That ritual is not superstition. It is the thread that ties sorrow to meaning. Modern pathologies. What happens when grief is suppressed? Grief is a guest. Unwelcome maybe, but inevitable. It knocks, and if you don't answer, it finds another way in. Silence does not protect you. Denial is not an escape. Grief ignored becomes something else. It becomes anxiety, depression, numbness, a chronic fatigue no doctor can explain, a tightness in the chest that won't leave, tears that never fall and never stop building. This is what happens when sorrow is denied a voice. It becomes pathology. Modern psychology has begun to catch up to what ancient people already knew. Grief is not just emotional, it's somatic. It lives in the body. Studies show that suppressed grief can lead to increased inflammation, weakened immune systems, high blood pressure, even heart disease. There's a reason it's called a broken heart. And if grief isn't allowed to express itself, it doesn't disappear. It lodges in the muscles. It coils in the stomach. It whispers behind your ears and haunts your dreams. In 2022, the DSM Diagnostic Manual of Mental Health added something new: prolonged grief disorder. It describes people who can't get over a loss even after a year. But what if the real disorder isn't lingering grief, but a culture that asks us to rush through it? What if taking a year or 2 or 5 to mourn someone you loved is not an illness but sanity? What if grief isn't the problem, but the lack of space to feel it is? When grief isn't acknowledged, it gets misdiagnosed. It becomes workaholism, substance abuse, irritability, social withdrawal, panic attacks, chronic illness, a vague aching sense of something missing. You may not even realize you're grieving. You just feel off, disconnected, exhausted. This is what unritualized grief looks like. It has no outlet, so it leaks. In many Western countries, you're expected to bounce back. You get 3 days off work. You receive a few sympathy cards, maybe a casserole, and then silence. But grief is not linear. It comes in waves. A smell, a song, a sudden emptiness in a crowded room. And when there's no one to talk to, no one who understands, you begin to doubt yourself. Am I broken? Shouldn't I be over this by now? Why can't I move on? The answer is simple. You weren't meant to do this alone. In cultures with rich mourning rituals, you are held. You're not asked to be strong. You're not asked to be honest. You're given time, space, witnesses. You're surrounded by people who have made this journey before and know the terrain. They don't fix you. They accompany you. But when those rituals disappear, you're left in a maze without a map. And the grief doesn't know where to go. We have become grief illiterate. We don't know how to talk about it, how to comfort others, how to sit in silence without trying to fix or rush. So we fall back on cliches. At least they're no longer in pain. They'd want you to be happy. Everything happens for a reason. These phrases are meant to help, but they don't. What helps more is presence. A hand on the shoulder, a quiet room, a whispered, "I miss him too." Grief doesn't need solutions. It needs companionship. Unexpressed grief can curdle. It becomes bitterness, resentment, addiction, self-harm. Sometimes it becomes shame. Why am I still not okay? What's wrong with me? But there is nothing wrong with you. You are feeling something enormous in a world that wants small emotions. You are human in a culture that rewards machines. Your grief is not an error. It is an echo of the love you still carry. In traditional cultures, grief was shared. Everyone mourned together. There were songs, stories, public weeping, rituals of release. Today, we go to therapy, which helps. But even therapy can become a lonely room. In a society where no one else is allowed to feel, what we need is community grief. Circles where people gather, not to fix each other, but to feel together, to scream, to cry, to sit in silence without fear, to make grief visible again. There is no healing without expression, no healing without ritual. You can bury a body, but you cannot bury grief. Not forever. It will surface in dreams, in illnesses, in art, in rage. And if you let it speak, if you give it ritual, it can become something sacred. If you are still grieving after all this time, you're not broken. You are ancient. You are remembering something the modern world has forgotten. That grief is not a flaw. It's an offering. Proof that something mattered. That someone mattered. And you still do. Reviving the rituals, a new grief for a new world. So here we are, at the edge of memory, at the mouth of a question. What do we do with our grief in a world that has forgotten how to mourn? We cannot return to the past. We don't all live in villages. We don't wail in the streets or wash bodies with sacred oil. We can't always gather under full moons or build altars of carved jade. But we are still human. We still love. We still lose. And we still need ritual. Ritual is not a superstition. It is a human technology, a system to metabolize emotion, to give grief a shape, to carry what feels too heavy alone. And it doesn't require religion, robes, or ancient chants. It only requires intention. What does modern grief ritual look like? It might look like this: lighting a candle every night for 49 days, placing their favorite book beside your bed, cooking their favorite meal on their birthday and eating it in silence, writing them letters when the words get stuck inside you, wearing their scarf, their jacket, their ring, sitting in nature and letting the wind remind you they were once here and you still are. These are not performances, they are prayers, tiny private ceremonies that let your grief breathe. Some are going further. Across the world, people are forming grief circles, gatherings in prison or online, where people come not to fix each other, but to witness each other. There is no agenda, only stories, tears, laughter, candles, silence. Some groups sing, some drum, some burn names in fire or send paper lanterns down rivers. These modern rituals are not copies of the old, they are continuations, because the dead are not asking for perfection, they are asking to be remembered. You can bring ritual back in whatever way feels real. Host a wake at home, not just for family, but for friends. Create a small shrine in your living room. Organize a grief walk where people wear black and walk together in silence. Learn keening. Sing a dirge. Let yourself cry without restraint. Hold space for someone else. Just be there. No fixing. You don't need permission. You only need presence. Maybe ritual begins when you stop trying to hide the ache. When you stop saying, "I'm fine," and instead say, "I miss them. I don't know how to carry this. I'm still grieving." And someone else, just one person, sits beside you and says, "I know." That moment is a ritual. Modern grief has been exiled, but it is not beyond reach. We can build something new, something ancient and alive. A culture where mourning is visible, where sorrow has space, where no one is left to cry alone in the bathroom stall at work or under the blanket at 3 a.m. We can become what ritual once was. We can be the container. You don't have to grieve perfectly. You don't need the right words. You don't need incense or Latin or sacred ash. You just need a moment to stop, to breathe, to feel. Light a candle, speak their name, cry if you need to, sing if you can, sit if that's all you can do. Let that be enough. Let that be sacred. If you are grieving now, know this: You're not lost. You're walking a path that millions have walked before you. You belong to a lineage of mourners, singers, bone washers, shrine builders, storytellers, lantern makers, and midnight whisperers who kept the dead alive through memory and ritual. You're not alone. You're never alone. Grief is not something to get through. It is something to carry, to be shaped by, to honor. Tonight, as the world sleeps, 1,000 candles flicker on unseen altars. 1,000 names are spoken into empty rooms. 1,000 hearts ache quietly, not knowing that they are part of the same song. Let your grief join theirs. Let it move like breath between stars. Let it be ritual. Let it be enough. To the one you lost, may your name be spoken. May your memory be kind. May your journey be blessed. And may the living learn how to grieve again. Midnight Mind, because the night remembers what we've forgotten.